Okay. Okay, here we are. It's Alexander Lawrence from the Portable Infinite. And today we're going to celebrate all things Jack Skelley. And he's a great writer. He's there he is in the picture. He's the author of Monsters, Dennis Wilson and Charles Manson, and Fear of Kathy Acker. You know, we're going to say the whole title here because it's important to get the Fear of Kathy Acker, get those words out there. FKO, and here it is. Here's the book. I have it right here. Copy. Go get yours right now. I mean, and Jack has his book. But you know, and there's a lot of Kathy Acker books out right now. Like there's here's Dennis Wilson. We'll put that away. But we got Chris Kraus after Kathy Acker and Eat Your Mind by Jason McBride, which is definitely the best one. But and there's a few more.
There's also this one that Matthias Wegner put out. This is massive catalog.
Oh, yeah.
It's huge and it's beautiful.
Yeah, well, Kathy, I mean, like, I knew Kathy like for 4 or 5 years, and when she was teaching at San Francisco Art Institute, I took a class with her. You know, I didn't just like meet her at a party or something. I definitely hung out with her, went to bars with her. We went to see a Dario Argento movie one time. She lived in The Haight, and I mean, for people out there, Kathy Acker wasn't, you know, I mean, a lot of people are attracted to her because she rode motorcycles, she lifted weights, she had tattoos, and she sort of looks like this lesbian icon. But I mean, as far as I know, she was mostly straight. She only got married to guys. She had mostly heterosexual experiences. I mean, she didn't move to London for a lesbian affair or something. You know, she was like she was married a couple times, and you know, she was one of the most well-read. I mean, she went to a lot of elite schools, Ivy League type schools, and she read a lot, and she knew a lot about literature. And when you're talking to her, you knew how smart she was. And I mean, how I first heard about her was, I mean, they don't know when she was born. She might have been born in the early 40s as far as we know. But I mean, she kind of maybe was a hippie back in the 60s, and then she kind of reinvented herself as kind of like a punk rocker. And when I heard about her, and when Blood and Guts in High School came out, it was like, oh, here's a punk rock novel. I mean, and her probably most biggest time was in the 80s, and you know, when he had Fear of Kathy Acker coming out, it was probably a reaction to Blood and Guts in High School, and kind of like all the attention surrounding Kathy Acker. You just want to comment about that, like just like the whole, how she kind of came on your radar, and how you started writing this book in 84 and 85.
Okay, right. That's pretty good. So just a little bit additional context. This book that just came out on Semiotext Press, the full title is The Complete Fear of Kathy Acker. So that means when a couple chapbooks came out in the 80s that I wrote, those and a few magazine pieces were the only remnants of the complete novel, and it is a novel. It's not a biography like those other books that had been published. So Semiotext just now this week published The Complete Fear of Kathy Acker, which includes the 2 chapbooks, which are on Illuminati Press, plus various scattered things that were published here and there, all in one. So there are huge chunks of the novel that have never appeared until just a week ago. So, right. And it is a novel. It's not about Kathy Acker. It's kind of an homage to her, a little bit to her style or something, like the way she fucked me. I wrote in the introduction, she kind of fucked with your brain the way she kind of fucks with the novel. So, but by no means is it like a sort of an adorational sort of bowing down to Kathy Acker. It's somewhat even farcical in a way. But there's no question that Kathy Acker was tremendous inspiration to now increasing numbers of people. And you're very fortunate, I think, Alex, that you got to, you know, work with her. And is it true that when you were a student that she had you masturbate while writing?
I don't know about that. I mean, I'll tell you, like, I wrote a thing called Reading, Writing Hell. That's that you can find on the internet, and Chris Kraus excerpted it in her book.
Right.
And but the very first writing exercise she made us do, I mean, there was the first class, and then I was in the second one, and there was a lot of people there because like there was like I think a lot of people didn't know she was teaching there at Art Institute. So I took the second one. A lot of people found out. So there was like a lot of people there the second class in 91. And the first day she said, okay, write about a family member. And then everybody kind of spent like about half an hour writing. And then she said, okay, write about having sex with this family member. And then some people just left the room there. Some people didn't even do it. And then, you know, I kind of wrote a bit of a comedy piece about my dad, you know, but which was very, it was very asexual experience for me in a way, because like it's just kind of laughable that we would have sex, or my dad wasn't very sexy, or you know, maybe to women back in the day, you know. But I think San Francisco Art Institute, I mean, there was people that were sort of like these East Coast trust fund types that maybe they had some kind of incestual relationships with their family back in the East Coast, and they got shipped off to San Francisco in the 90s. So yeah, she definitely, her idea was when you write down it's like, it's really, you know, what does that mean? You know, like, and
Right.
you know, like, is it a construct? Is it you? Who is this I that we're talking about? And I mean, she later came out with a book called Portrait of the I, which was like a thing. But yeah, I think, I mean, I kind of take this book as kind of maybe kind of like a part kind of satire, you know, part like you're just kind of taking like, because I mean, in 84, 85, I mean, nobody had really read a lot of Kathy, but they were kind of probably maybe read some articles about her, or maybe read like a short story. And so you're kind of, you know, this was like a hot take on maybe just the kind of vibe. And she was definitely influenced by Burroughs and Gertrude Stein and Marguerite Duras and other people. And I think a lot of 80s artists were doing collage, and that was in the air and stuff. How do you feel about that?
So when you say it was a hot take, that's very true, because it was a sudden inspiration. And so, and it was written in a gush, kind of, in over a year's period, roughly 84 to 85. And then I went back in 1987 and kind of tied up some of the loose threads and put a conclusion on it. And also when you say she asked you to, you know, probe what does it mean, the word I mean? I mean, that theme, it runs throughout Fear of Kathy Acker, almost subconsciously. You know what I mean? It was almost an intuitive thing, Alex. But as I look at it closer every time, and I have other people like yourself, or like Sabrina Tarasoff and her afterword to the book, she sort of posits it's the search for meaning, for the reality, like the narrator's looking for proof of self. And he's finding it not only in, you know, kind of adopting the stories of friends or other people, like appropriation, like Kathy Acker did, or like collage, but in every experience he has, in every sexual experience, every drug experience, every experience with TV and movies and products and capitalism and politics. He's always trying to find who he is, and he never can quite nail it down, but he keeps going for it.
Right. Well, in your introduction, I mean, you kind of mentioned that you never met Acker. You had that postcard, and you kind of like linked it into auto fiction a little bit. And yeah, I mean, I mean, when I read your poems, I get a sense of the Jack Skelley, the poet, the poetic voice, like who you are. But this narrator, it's another person. It's like it's not the same Jack Skelley from the poems. I mean, can you just talk about autofiction and
like some of the, and I even admit that in the novel, like some of the, there's one section head is called that didn't really happen. And that's composed of some stories that I just stole from my friends, various friends, maybe 4 or 5, 10 of them, and you're purposefully, you're not supposed to know if it's quote unquote true
And
or real.
I mean, also in Amy Gersler's introduction, she talks about autofiction, and she mentions Erica Jong and Burroughs and Acker and
Mhm.
William Blake, and she kind of like came away with like this, maybe this book's 85 version of Howl by Allen Ginsberg. Can you comment on that a little bit?
I mean, I think there's something to it. She kind of does explain the differences. You know, Ginsburg was, I forget how she says it, Jewish and gay, and I'm definitely Catholic and straight, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a lot of overlap. We both have this admiration for William Blake. And I do quote Ginsburg's Howl in the book. I don't think explicitly, but I just say Ginsburg, and I talk about the Moloch section of Howl. So there's that Ginsbergian thing going on there.
And then there was also Tosh Berman's review, and he kind of compared you to Andre Breton, the surrealism. Was there
Nausea.
was there kind of any influence there, or you think, or
No, I mean, yeah, he compared it to not that surrealist novel Nausea, and which was a beautiful book I had not even read till I read Tosh's review a couple months ago. But the basis for him making that comparison is in that novel. Nausea is beautiful. The narrator tells the story through his friends, somewhat in the same way. And also, there's this.
oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what's plus the narrator's relationship to this mysterious female character, Nausea, is very evocative and romantic and mysterious.
Yeah, I think. Well, also the back for some people, I mean, the '80s, I mean, was like there was people like Gordon Lish and Raymond Carver and the whole minimalist trend, and I mean, and Norman Mailer, Gore Vidal were still around. There was kind of like Gay Talese and New York establishment of writers, and I mean, I kind of consider myself, I kind of consider this book to be kind of a precursor to Freddie Sanellis's American Psycho. Some of the
Or Less
early,
Than Zero,
no,
right?
no,
American.
no. I think even the more the American Psycho with the pop culture reference.
Okay.
I think Less Than Zero is more part of the Raymond Carver kind of thing.
Okay. So you're
It's
saying American Psycho in the sense of like all the weird pop culture references.
yeah. I think it's that
Yeah.
the early the experimental books by Irving Welsh, like Marabou Stork Nightmares and Acid
Mhm.
House, some of the crazy kind of, and also Mark Leiner, my cousin, my gastroenterologist. It kind of precedes all those books
Mhm.
in a real interesting kind of way. Kind of like it's like, hey, this is like kind of like it's this thing that came like 5 years later. These people that were, because I think, I mean, at that time in the '70s and '80s, there was like writers like David Foster Wallace and
Mhm.
others that were kind of talking about, oh yeah, we're modernist writers, but like us born in the '50s and '60s, we watched a lot of TV too. So that was like as much as an influence as reading like, Ernest Hemingway or something. So can you comment on like this pop culture and TV watching and as it relates to fiction and these other writers?
So, I mean, although those books followed Fear of Kathy Acker, they were not influenced by it because it didn't, no one read
Well,
it.
no. I didn't say it was influence. I
No,
said
no,
it was just kind of
I
since
know,
it was a precursor. It was like a
thematically. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm getting to that. I'm getting to that. So yes, but there is true though that theme of like pop culture, that's kind of like my thing. You know what I mean? It always has been from the beginning of my poetry and everything. Like Barney, the Modern Stone Age magazine, are poetic or fictional takes on pop culture and the attempts to find sort of archetypal or mythological substance to pop culture personages and stories. So that was my thing. So I love it when people do that. You know what I mean? Like it's just like, and I don't. It's great. Yeah. So for sure.
Because I mean, there was a big resistance to Bret Easton Ellis and maybe even Mark Liner, like, oh yeah, maybe they're just like, it's just this glut of lowbrow culture
Right.
and just
It's
like,
funny how Ellis does it. I think it's really hilarious. His goes to see U2 and like, I don't know. It's very funny.
but
Yeah.
I think, I mean, when you, if you would have published this in 85, I think there would have maybe been like, I don't know, I think it would have been hard to get published by like maybe mainstream publishers or something, because they would just so
Yeah.
it took now we love it because it's like we love the the mix of high and low, and this is like almost like a arty book that's, you can kind of tell now because we've kind of absorbed the shock of the dominance of pop culture and the internet and everything now. And
So, but I like that how you say that, and yet there's a ton of pop culture stuff in this book, dumb culture even, you know what I mean, like even pop culture that the narrator reviles, right? And yet at the same time there's a huge amount of very quote unquote serious passages about suicide and depression and death and more sort of metaphysical and almost cosmic themes, but all of them from the reductively dumb to the sort of uh, kind of quasi sublime are undercut with irony, and kind of lots of this sort of playing with high and low sort of themes, because it almost feels like when you write about love or romance or transcendence, at least I did at that time, it's just hard not to sound pretentious, so it's kind of constantly undercutting it. And that's another thing Kathy Acker did, right? She was always super funny, even when she was talking about how fucking fucked up she was and depressed.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying, again, I'm not stealing from her or whatever, but just saying that was a kind of a force that she unleashed in me and other people later. Yeah.
Yeah, Kathy definitely, her books came from a certain lineage, and Blood and Guts in high school is not the end of publishing. I mean, there's
Right.
room for 2, maybe 10 books that are like Blood and Guts. I mean, I think Kathy wanted to see herself as kind of like a singular thing. She didn't want to be she didn't want to be part of a group of autofiction or new narrative or language poetry. She was associated with those people, but she was her own thing. And
correct. And I wrote that article about autofiction a couple of years ago for LARB, Los Angeles Review of Books, and I spoke to Chris Krause about it, and she's pretty clear on all that too. She kind of a little bit poo-poos the moniker autofiction. She prefers new narrative, because if you think about it, everything kind of is autobiographical based, you know what I mean? So almost any kind of novel except like westerns or spy novels or something like that.
Yeah, or pulp fictions and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, like I think to understand a book like this, I mean, you have to almost like storyboard it, and I kind of wrote down like a
I want to hear your analysis. Yes.
I mean, I'm a text guy. I'm not like, go into the Jack Skelley's biography or I mean, you can look at other books, but the words themselves, and like kind of storyboard and just kind of like almost like write a screenplay based on the book. And I mean, a lot of people look at books like Naked Lunch and they go, plot, what plot? Or they look at Lou Reed's Metal Machine Music, but some guy comes along and writes a score based on it, and Lou Reed's like surprised. They go, how did you do that? But I went to this book and I kind of like, okay, so chapter 1. Okay, so you're kind of the narrator, who could or could not be Jack Skelley himself. It's probably, I just prefer calling him the narrator, is in Torrance. He's at the Del Alma Mall. He's smoking pot with Paul Roessler from the band Twisted Roots and a few other bands. And, Screamers. And okay, and then what in the first chapter we get Sex Fantasy number 1. There's 8 of them that I've located in the book. There might be more. There might be 10 or 12, but there's 8 major ones. This is the first one, and then there's sort of a take on Hollywood there,
Mhm.
and Hollywood's kind of like this weird evil place. It's kind of like the forbidden zone, and then but he's on a trip from Torrance to Venice where he's going to work. I guess it's the Tower Records, maybe. I don't know. Well, so what do we? So is that oh, that's accurate, right?
So kind of, so yeah, the very first line of the novel is, I'm walking down in Torrance trying to get back to Hollywood, and Paul Rossler picks me up, and he has all this really great pot, and we drive down the side streets to the Delamo Mall to we can smoke this really great pot, et cetera, et cetera. So that I've come to realize now, Alex, that that is my attempt to begin the story in medias res,
All right.
as Homer did with the Odyssey, where Odysseus is miles from his home in Ithaca and trying to get back to his Hollywood or his Venice.
Okay, so it's sort of a fake beginning. Okay, so it's like yeah, it's sort of like yeah, I mean and so like in chapter 2 you're changing the channels, so maybe
Right.
each chapter is like a TV channel, like we used to like go on the dial and spin the dial
Right.
around before the remotes came in. And
Yeah.
let's see. Okay, so and then the second chapter has a note from Marie Osmond. There's when he gets to Venice, he finds out they're shooting a TJ Hooker with Shatner and Marie Osmond, and then there's a reference to Ed Smith, and then the
Mhm.
Ray Beats. It's great. I think it's great to have like surf music always in LA novels and stuff. And then
Mhm.
there's another sex fantasy here. I guess this is yeah, sex fantasy number 2, and we got 2 chapters, 2 sex fantasies, so that's great. And then what is this? Oh yeah, it's a sex fantasy about Brentwood moms and stuff. So that's pretty.
Mhm.
And then there's a long meditation on TV. So there's
Right.
and then the third one chapter is about also watching TV. And then there's like the Boy George and Phil Donahue
Mhm.
part. And then the fourth chapter is you switch into channels again, and then we get to Billy Idol, and the narrator kind of becomes Billy Idol for a bit, and
Correct.
we get sex fantasy number 3, and then there's this kind of comparison to looking at buildings and comparing them to genitalia and penises. And then what do you say? Oh yeah, there's a quote here. Hollywood is a pussy, and I'm going to drive there. That's great.
Okay, so let me go back to your TV analogy of switching channels. I think that's pretty good. I like that. The TV, the TV and network TV and sort of the marketing power and impetus behind network television is a theme that runs throughout the book as well. So there are, like, for example, there's one section almost right at the Billy Idol section where the character's in a hospital room and the night nurse comes in, and while she's masturbating, narrates the 7 categories of network TV and what they mean. And
Oh,
the final 2 categories of network TV are sex and uncontrollable paranoia. And those 2 themes can sell anything, she says. She's
right.
kind of like an Athena type goddess figure that tells him the meaning of TV and its import in his daily life and the lives of society members.
Yeah, she's like a Marcia McLuhan, like just kind of come to life and
She's
stuff.
Marcia McLuhan mixed with Athena. There you go.
So yeah, I mean, I know, and then by this part of the novel, I noticed like a lot of references to the Dodgers. Vin Scully's almost like a second character to the narrator almost. He comes up a lot. And let's see, the Dodgers and the 405 freeway shows up a lot in the book. And then I guess there's porn stars. Rick Lawndale asks if he can be in the novel, like just kind of a weird reference there. Okay, so
That's kind of like the novel being aware of itself and making the reader be aware of the reader's self as they read the novel and become part of the sort of the composition of the novel, right? Gets kind of meta or whatever there.
okay, so is this the same? Yeah. Okay, so we get to the grandma hospital. Okay, so that's the night nurse, and then you become Billy Idol like towards the end of that. Okay, so the next part is starts with like a gay scene, and then 69 tacos. Is that a real place? Is that what does the 69 refer to? Is that like the price or
I
the
don't
year?
remember. I think there may have been a 69 tacos, but the 2 gay characters are doing 69 right there.
Okay, so in this chapter, you go back to Torrance, and then it's kind of like a return to childhood. And then there's a lot of talk about napalm and napalm industry, and then there's kind of like a vision of William Blake. And
So in the return to Torrance part, there does go into his childhood, and he has a vision of the homunculus. I don't think it's spelled out as such in that passage, but he unearths a little mudman from his backyard, and the mudman tells him about his life and about his future. And it's very sort of Jungian little moment there. And it's kind of based on dreams or whatever from that time.
so yeah, and then well, there's an actual flashback, and Bob Flanagan's sort of involved with that one, and let's see, and then the 405 freeway shows up again in this one. Okay, so and then let's see. Okay, in the next chapter, you turn into, what is that? Is that Kerouac? Or
there is a reference to Kerouac very briefly.
yeah,
Kerouac alone in his attic crying or drunken or something
and
like that.
and then you refer to Ghostbusters, which was a movie that just came out like that year. So there's Ghostbusters, Jack Kerouac, and then there's Sex Fantasy #5, which is like Catholic themed. And then in the next chapter, we get to the record store, and then Olivia Newton-John comes in and wonders if she wants to look. She's looking for a record. Was that true story there, or?
Yeah, Tower Records, no. And I even admit later, I never worked at Tower. All those things, all these stories happened to Carmel Moran and Mary Immersion, who worked at Tower, not to me. So I just stole their stories about run-ins with celebrities.
Okay, so yeah, Olivia Newton-John, Dennis Wilson, Fleetwood Mac, his marriage. You ended his marriage. That was somebody else's story.
Yes.
And then in this chapter, you also refer to yourself as Vince Scully's son. And let's see. Oh yeah, there's this stealing couple. And then Ginsburg shows up, and like also at this time the Olympics came. I remember that being a real dark period because like Reagan got elected again, and the Olympics came, and they tried to do all these murals, and they tried to paint the freeways, and I think a lot of my friends that's 84, 85 kind of got into the heroin scene at that time.
Drove them into heroin to see the Olympics.
Yeah, just everything.
You know, I did an event with Chris Krause last week, and she really keened in on that section about the Olympics and Reagan and everything, because, you know, she's very into that period with the Iran-Contra war and everything she wrote about in I Love Dick and many other books. So she asked me to talk about that too. And it's true that, I mean, Reagan was like all suffusing sort of big brother type figure in the country and through the network TV at that time. And a lot of people were talking about the rehearsals, and it's USA jingoism was kind of a rehearsal for some kind of like military event or some kind of non-constitutional takeover of the government or something. A little bit of uncontrollable paranoia there, perhaps.
Okay, well, I'll continue here. Okay, so the next chapter is called Horny Dreams. It's like this, in this chapter, you're just kind of like, it's just going like full on thinking about girls. There's an anonymous letter from somebody, and there's a mention of Lydia Lunch and John Wayne, who you told me that was somebody else, or there was some.
Oh gosh, okay, that's a complicated story. It turns out, Lydia Lunch, I did do a reading with Lydia Lunch at Beyond Baroque. I mentioned that in there at that time. So she was on tour, and we had her at Beyond Baroque, and she was great. And then in the story, the character is with his girlfriend or something. They're at the Norton Simon Museum, and they run into this other character named John Wayne, who at the Lydia Lunch reading, Lydia Lunch had John Wayne open up for her at the reading and read some poetry. So turns out that character is actually somebody very well known in the literary community now, which I don't even want to say at this point because I haven't had a chance to talk to him about it. But it's just very weird how I didn't even realize until, you know, 4 or 5 months ago that person that has this little anecdote in the book is actually an existing person now.
All right, okay.
And is part of the literary scene now. So I want to talk to him first before we.
Okay, we won't, I won't bust you on that one. Okay, so,
Okay.
okay, so let's take a break here. I'm gonna start up another video.
Okay.
This is the end of part one. Definitely, we'll have a link in the description. Buy the book, everyone, and we're gonna come back. There's gonna be part two, and we're gonna continue our analysis of the rest of the book. Okay, so.
So